Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is with us. Are we still doing enough to support Ukraine? I know that they were very upset about some of the things that we heard from Ben Wallace last week.
Well, we've taken a cross-party approach to Ukraine, supporting the government, working with the government on this, because they do face the most terrible circumstances, the illegal invasion by Putin's Russia. And we've seen the very strong defence that Ukraine has shown. So I think we're right to keep supporting Ukraine and to keep working with Ukraine. And I'm sure we will continue to do so.
Ben Wallace has said he's going to step down from government whenever there's a reshuffle, probably in September, stepping down altogether at the next election. 3 by-elections this week. How confident are you feeling?
We're working really hard. Selby, one of the by-elections, is right next door to Ming Castleford. And look, it has a 20,000 Conservative majority. So this is obviously, they start with that huge majority. But what we're finding, talking to people, and I was chatting to people there over the weekend, people are just really fed up of just how broken the country feels, the cost of living crisis, but also public services, and just fed up with the way in which they feel the Conservative government's been treating people. So, look, we'll be working really hard for every vote, working for everything that we can do, and we'll keep doing so this week.
It's funny, because when the government minister sat there in the last hour, he said that he's been speaking to everybody and they're getting a lot of support. So you're obviously speaking to different people.
Well, we'll see on Thursday. We'll see on Thursday. But I think we found just a very strong, just real frustration. Just people are fed up after 13 years of the Tories, that just fed up of the way that they've been treated and not feeling listened to, and just feeling like the country has gone backwards. It is time for a change.
Now, you are very aware of this political, this silver fox who's strutting the political stage at the moment in the form of Tony Blair. You used to work for him. Is it a help or a hindrance, him getting involved?
He's always going to have views and ideas, and the Tony Blair Institute does a lot of really interesting research, and that is a good thing, because it's part of the debate, isn't it, about our future. We had a very successful Labour government after 1997, and it's important to draw on the lessons from that, but we're also setting out new plans for the future. So, Keir Starmer set out the 5 missions for a Labour government. Those are his strongly held views about the way in which the country needs to change. We'll learn lessons from the past, but also this is about the future and the challenges we face.
It doesn't really help, though, when he starts telling Keir Starmer what to do.
It's, lots of people are going to have their views, aren't they? It's good for the debate, but, we're setting out a plan for what a future Labour government could do to just build a stronger country, to turn around our public services, but crucially to get our economy growing as well.
So are you going to spend more money on public services?
So we've set out areas where we would increase investment, for example, in our schools, by making sure that the private schools pay their fair share, that are registered as charities are paying their fair share in tax, and then using that money to increase investment in our state schools. We've talked too about ending the non-DOMS tax loophole, using that money to pay for breakfast clubs for kids in school, for investing in our National Health Service. So we are setting out areas where we want to invest in our public services, but we're also being really straight with people about where the funding is going to come from, because we know that we've got to be really responsible with the public finances and also show that we can deliver. I think people are fed up of promises that they think can't be delivered. They want to know how it's going to be paid for, how it's actually going to be done.
But you're not going to increase the 2-child cap on benefits, and that's splitting the party.
There's a real problem around the 40% increase in child poverty that we've seen under the Conservatives. The last Labour government cut child poverty. And we are also saying, again, we've got to keep saying how it is we'll pay for things, because, of course, we need to address child poverty. That's why I think the breakfast clubs are so important. It's about making sure that kids don't start school feeling hungry in the morning. And John Ashworth has also talked about the importance of reforming universal credit and having a proper long-term plan that can get people into work, lift people out of poverty and get a fairer society rather than going backwards.
So you support the 2-child cap?
Well, we've just been really clear.
No,
we can only fund it. So we've got to be clear about what we can fund, and that's why Keir Starmer's set out the position, because we've got to make sure that any policy that we propose, anything that we might want to change, anything that we might not like that the Tories have done, we've still got to say how we're going to fund it, and that, I think, is what's really important.
So you do support it for now?
We've just said we're not...
People like the Jonathan Ashworth, I forget what his job is now, Work and Pensions Shadow Secretary, he says it's heinous.
Yeah, and we opposed it when it first came in, and we have pointed out a whole series of different things that the Conservatives have done that are damaging, but we've also been really clear that anything that we say has got to be funded. I was part of the last Labour government where we did a huge amount of work to cut child poverty. We also went into that first election in 1997 being really clear about only saying the things that we could fund. But we got the economy growing, we built our public services, and we did a whole series of things that lifted families out of poverty. But if you don't have that plan to get the economy growing and to have that long-term improvements to our country, you can't do any of the things, whether it's lifting children out of poverty, whether it's improving our NHS, whether it's getting police back on the streets, or tackling our national security, some of the issues that I'm talking about today.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought us round to that. I hadn't forgotten. Particularly, you want to talk about AI. What would Labour do to protect the country as far as AI is concerned that's not being done at the moment?
We've got to modernise our response to national security threats. They are changing all of the time. One of those areas is around the use of technology, and particularly now the use of AI as part of online radicalisation. The extremists and terror threats who can end up causing huge havoc and harm and attacking our way of life. But at the moment, there are loopholes in the law which mean that we can't properly tackle that AI radicalisation. If somebody designs a chatbot to radicalise people, to promote extremism, hatred and terrorism, then we're being warned that the law doesn't cover that. That's not good enough. We need to prevent use of technology to increase terrorist threats.
Will you have won 3 by-elections by Friday morning?
We're working really hard on all of the by-elections. We're just fighting for every vote. We'll see how it goes on Thursday, but I really hope that people will put their trust in Labour and show the government, send the message to the Tories. It really is time for change.